had one or two Christian foundations that had stumbled across Hagar, and other than that, really no profile, nobody reaching out here in the United States. So, long story short, I got acquainted with them, started to do a little volunteer work, a little contract work, and they realized that if they were really going to support the mission, they needed to hire staff. And so I got sent to Cambodia for a few weeks, and we all had the opportunity to decide, you know, are we going to do this or are we going to do this? And we did it. So it's been about a year and a half.
Wow.
So was that your only trip to Cambodia?
Oh, no.
Or have you been back several times?
No, I've been back a couple times since.
Okay.
Yep.
One of the questions I was really wanting to ask too is if you have a case, and maybe you have one, or a child or a woman specifically that you maybe met while you were there, but something, a story of one of the women or kids that really exemplifies what it is that Hagar's mission is, where they came in and went through the program.
Well, there are many stories. You know, behind when I do a PowerPoint, I always have kind of a pie chart with the percentages, and I always say, you know, behind every one of those percentages, there's a story. And every story is different, every story is sad, every story is, you know, just heartbreaking. But one story that I think kind of exemplifies that, because you know, with those we serve, it's usually not, they were trafficked for sex, or it's not a single incident.
Right.
You know, it's a long journey of one abuse, unfortunate happening, lack of support. It just goes on and on and on. We have a woman from Australia who leads our counseling program who had worked, you know, her career in Australia with domestic violence victims, and she said, I just never heard stories like this. You know, it's just all on a different level. But anyway, there was a story of Safip, who was, when she was 13, 14, she didn't have parents, so she was living with an aunt and uncle. She was 13 or 14, and her uncle raped her. Then her cousin rapes her. So her aunt, who doesn't believe her, casts her out of the house. You know, right there we have our Hagar. The abuse, she's cast out. So Safip knows that she has a brother and a sister who she hasn't seen for years. She thinks she knows where they live, has no money, begs a bus driver to take her to the province where she thinks they are, and he complies. But he doesn't take her to her brother and sister, he takes her to a brothel. And so she's abused there for 6, 9 months. Finally, a man comes who she thinks is a good man and tells her that he will take her away and he will make her safe. He will take care of her. So she believed him. She went with him. He took her over the border to Thailand. She became a sex slave for him and his son. And life was even worse than it had been in the brothel. Then she somehow escaped. She gets to Phnom Penh. She's pregnant, somehow got connected with Hagar, and went through the process. The recovery began. She was safe. She learned to read. She got some training, some skills. Today, she's out working. She's earning a livable wage. Her child is in school. And, you know, not only does she have a new life, but she has a whole new vision for her child. In fact, her dream is that her child becomes a doctor.
Wow.
And
that's amazing.
So it's that long-term economic empowerment and recovery, economic, spiritual, emotional, physical recovery that is what we're after.
So with each one of these survivors, you'll have, you know, something that's really difficult to, you know, when you're dealing with the survivors and them healing and recovering from their trauma, and then you'll have, of course, the positive outcome. So what are some of the difficulties and struggles that they face and that the staff faces along the way of that recovery?
Well, you know, when the women and children come to us, they're not necessarily believing that they're finally in a good
Right,
place.
right.
You know, they've been betrayed
Obviously.
before. Yep, even their parents have betrayed them.
Mhm.
So, and in the first initial phase, there is that period of time before they trust, before they open their hearts, before they begin that transformation process. That is a difficult time. Another very difficult issue for our staff overseas is just not being able to take everybody in.
Right.
And having, you know, just on a
Right.
regular basis,
Yeah.
on a daily basis. Other very, very sad, heartbreaking cases, and just not having the resources to take in more.
Where do they go if they
Right.
don't?
Well, they, I don't know. They're, you know, again, they're not coming directly to Hagar, so they are other human rights organizations there, whether they are IJM, World Hope, Agape, you know, there's a whole list of them. I assume they kind of go down a list and, you know, try to find
Find a place.
somebody to take the woman or the child. You know, Cambodia is just not set up. I don't know how much listeners know about Cambodia itself and the context there, but almost all the social services are provided by non-governmental organizations. The government really isn't stepping up.
Right.
You know, they do. There are some ministries and so forth, ministries of the government, but as far as providing services, there are no social net safety nets, and very little provided in the public sector. So. You know, that also creates a situation when we talk about Afghanistan versus Cambodia versus Vietnam. One big difference for us is in Cambodia, it's very, very free. You know, really anybody can set up an NGO, which is, of course, a blessing and a curse,
And
because
Right,
anybody does
right.
set up
Sure.
NGOs.
Yeah.
And so the quality varies, you know, hugely. And of course, that's not the case in Vietnam, nor is it the case in Afghanistan. But, so that is definitely probably the hardest thing, is when we don't have the financial resources to do more of what we know we're doing well, and we know the need is there.
Yeah, we have a question here. What is the process for deciding who can be in Hagar, who's accepted? I mean, I know it's probably very complex and it's a long
Right.
answer possibly, but in just in a brief way, what's the process like?
Yeah, well, and actually my answer can't be very long, because I'm not really intimately aware of
Okay.
that, I would say. You know, we have some criteria. Hagar feels that our area of expertise is sort of the really hard cases. In Cambodian Khmer, there is a phrase, the too hard basket, and that's the role that we fit.
Okay.
So it's typically a complex case, but you know, the first line of decision is simply, do we have room? You know,
Right.
and if we do, is it somebody that fits what we do best, and is it somebody that we feel we have the expertise to be able to help? Like the boys from backgrounds of sexual abuse, we turned them down for, you know, a couple of years. We were
Right.
getting referrals, and we just said, no, we don't do that. We don't know how, we don't have, you know, we're
Right.
not prepared for that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we got several on here, actually. We'll go through these real quick. How is their protection from retribution from their abusers? Is that even an issue?
You know, I think with the trafficking, and again, I'm kind of going out on a limb here, but I think it's more retribution. I think we have more trouble with the domestic abuse cases. You know, trafficking, too, the trafficker, these people are just
don't-
commodities.
yeah.
I mean, there's
Right.
more where they came from.
Right.
They're not going to knock themselves out to get
Right.
one little girl back. Sadly. So that would be my answer to that.
Okay, one more is in the realm of counseling. What kind of counseling do they have? Do they go through, I guess?
Well, we have all national staff that provide counseling. We have kind of upper level of management that are expatriates from various parts of the world, but the frontline staff is all Khmer or Cambodian or Vietnamese.